Hello everybody, welcome to episode 261 of Show Fever. Today we'll be going over Final Fantasy II. Specifically, I played the Pixel Remaster, at least the one that's on PS4. Or, not PS4, PS5, but I believe it's actually a PS4 game in the store, but whatever. So, Final Fantasy II. This game is an incredibly mixed bag. So I'll kind of go over the story first, which is the thing that I like most about this game. So this story is substantially better than Final Fantasy 1's. Like, Final Fantasy 1 has a good story, but it's very basic. However, this one is leaps and bounds over Final Fantasy 1. Like, story-wise, this is probably my fourth favorite game in the Final Fantasy series out of the one I played. I've played 16, 6, 4, 7, 1, and 2 now. And Crisis Core and the likes. Well, yeah, so the story. It's really divided into three parts. First is destroying the Dreadnought. Now, the Palamecian Empire has created this massive warship that can go around and destroy cities with ease, which we actually see it do later on in the story. But, yeah, so we get introduced to our main characters, which are Firion, Guy, and Maria. They ultimately end up joining forces with this rebel group sourcing from Altair, who is led by the, monarch of Flynn, which is Hilda. And we got to go about to figure out what's going on with this Dreadnought so that we can eventually destroy it. So we end up going around the world here and slowly learn stuff about the Dreadnought. We end up meeting up with the Cid of this game, who has created the airship, and the Palamecian Empire made the Dreadnought based off observations of his airship. And so we see, as we slowly progress about doing this, we ultimately have a character join our team by the name of Minwu, and we also then eventually, I don't know if Joseph is in this part, but we do know. I don't think Joseph is in this. It's a Minwu. Ultimately, we end up going and fighting Borghen, who was a previous supporter of Flynn and all of that, but ultimately he ended up turning against him and joining the Palamecian Empire. We fight him. And ultimately, this all ends up culminating with us destroying the Dreadnought. However, the Dreadnought is not destroyed before it can do some destruction itself. It actually ends up destroying many of the cities around the world. And it is not, well, it doesn't make all of them inaccessible. What's really cool is after this happens to all the cities, you can go inside them and see, like, the damage that it's caused. That was really cool. I really like that little tidbit there. But yeah, so then we get into the second part of our story, which is now, instead of focusing on destroying the Dreadnought, we focus on acquiring the Ultima Tome, which is the major magic, the strongest magic in all of history that will allow us to beat the Emperor of Palamecia. So we go about searching for this. There's many little side stories here and there. So we end up meeting with Joseph. Joseph ends up sacrificing his life at one point when we get a boulder chasing after us. He gets crushed. And we continue around searching for Ultima. Leads us to Mysidia, go through the Mysidia Tower and all of that. Once we get to the Mysidia Tower, we reach the Ultima Tome. However, we cannot break the seal ourselves without causing major harm. So Minwu is there, and Minwu ends up sacrificing his own life to break the seal off the Ultima and acquire the Ultima Tome. Now, during this part of the story as well, we also get introduced to the concept of the Dragoons and the Wyverns at Castle Deist, or Deist. And here we learn about them, but also this will become an integral part in the story later on, because we actually end up finding the last Dragoon in the third part of the story. Well, they're not technically divided into three parts, but like you can tell they are kind of three main objectives. But yeah, so after Minwu sacrifices himself, we get the Ultima Tome, which I did not end up using because I heard that it was absolute trash, so I just did not use it. So then in the third part of the story, we eventually end up finding the fourth member of our party, who is Rickard. Rickard ends up joining us, and like I said, he's the last Dragoon. And now we are dead set searching on beating the Emperor of Palamecia. So we end up going to Palamecia Castle, where we ultimately get up to the top and fight him briefly. However, he ends up having like a brief skirmish, and Rickard has to go in and ultimately sacrifice himself against the Emperor of Palamecia, because to kind of allow all of us to escape. He comes in, is like, stay behind, I'll beat the Emperor, make sure he dies. The Wyvern ends up coming in, transporting you away from Palamecia Castle as it is destroyed and essentially taken elsewhere. But yeah, so after the transformation of Palamecia Castle, we see that the Empire is defeated. However, Maria's brother, Leon, who is the Dark Knight, as we've heard about throughout all of this, essentially, we see that, Hilda and Gordon are the two main monarchs of Flynn. We also have Gordon on our team for a while in the earlier parts of the story, before he actually becomes a co-ruler once more. But yeah, so Gordon and Hilda end up reporting to us after figuring this out that the Dark Knight has essentially reestablished the Polynesian Empire. So we're forced to go through all of this once more and ultimately meet up with Leon. But Leon ultimately reveals that he wasn't he's actually good. He was kind of being manipulated. And here we see as he joins our party. However, in this moment, we also see as the astral spirit of the Emperor ends up rising from hell and now goes through the Jade Passage and sets up his throne in Castle Pandemonium, or Pandemonium Castle. So then we gotta head over to Pandemonium Castle, where we go through the Jade Passage, and ultimately go to the top of Castle Pandemonium, where we end up fighting the Emperor for a final time, and then the story is ended, everyone is saved, the world is yippee. And so after that, we just kind of get the aftermath and everything, everyone thanking everyone. We see as Joseph's daughter comes in and thanks the people, well, not the people, but the main party and all of that. And everything, as per usual, is hunky-dory, at least as per usual for the last 2 Final Fantasy games that I've played. So, that is the story. Now, I will get into the characters. My favorite character was honestly probably... Character-wise, I liked Furion the most, who's the main character. But, funny character-wise, I like Guy the most, because Guy is, stupid, but he can, also speak animal languages. He speaks with a beaver at one point in the story, so that was really cool. But, a lot of the side characters are kind of underdeveloped. But, I'd say probably the most developed one is probably Minwu or Joseph, but Minwu's only really developed because, he's in the story for so long. Joseph isn't really in the story for super long, but he is pretty developed. So, yeah, I'd say that's probably it. I wasn't a massive fan of Leon, because Leon just really isn't present until, towards the end, and, yeah. So, with that, I guess I'll kind of get into my favorite location. My favorite locations were definitively the Jade Passage and, well, not necessarily the Jade Passage, but Castle Pandemonium and Castle Polymecia. Those two were super cool. I loved both of them. They had sick designs, and especially once you get to the top floors of Castle Pandemonium, where you're, in space, essentially. And well, not really space. I guess you're in hell? I don't know. But yeah, and it ultimately progressed towards the massive throne that has the Emperor on it and his hellish form. So yeah, I really did like both of those locations. They were super cool. But speaking on the locations, I did like how they actually changed that story. After the Dreadnought attack, how they showed damage, the world was darkened, the visibly darkened after going in those cities. And then later on, there is another attack where we see that certain cities are destroyed, Altair is obliterated and everything. So that was super cool to see everything play out. Now, also, I kind of forgot to mention Rickard. I think if Rickard would have been in the story for a little bit longer, he would have been one of my favorite characters, because he does have a cool story with the Wyverns and all of that, about how they can speak with the Wyverns, about how Rickard was stuck in the belly of the Leviathan, and you had to help him escape and everything, which I didn't really mention because it's not a super important part of the story, but it does play a role. Like I said, with getting Rickard, and Rickard plays a major role with ensuring the death of the Emperor, though the Emperor just ends up coming back to life, essentially. But yeah, so that's how there really is for the locations. Now, I guess music was always great as usual. It wasn't necessarily one of my favorites. None of the tracks really stood out to me. However, it was just a solid Final Fantasy soundtrack. So, let's see. I guess I will speak on what kind of messes this game up for me. The leveling system. The leveling system, how it works is you have to level specific attributes through using them. So weapons, you got to use a specific weapon to level up that character's stat in that level. Shields, you got to have a shield to level up a shield. You got to have certain spells, you have to use them a certain amount of times to level them up. And this was just super tedious. I did not like this at all. It wasn't my cup of tea. If this game would have had the same battle system as Final Fantasy 1, this game would genuinely be my 4th favorite Final Fantasy of all time. However, it does not, and it really just kind of grinds my gears, because especially later on in the game, to get up to higher levels, for example, once I fought the Emperor the first time, I just kept having to cycle, and he just kept healing, so I had to go in the world and level up Flame, and this took me 2 hours to get Flame to 16, and I was auto battling and everything. So yeah, that took me a while, but it like I said, it does suck. I did not like this leveling system really at all, and I hope it's not in Final Fantasy 3 whenever I play it, but I doubt it will be. I'm pretty certain this one is unique, and it's just kind of tedious. You could just level up the characters normally, get their stats to go up and everything, buy higher level spells as compared to leveling the spells themselves, then I feel like that would have been a lot better. However, it just wasn't the case in this, and it really did kind of ruin parts of the game for me. But that is, I guess, it is what it is. Then, I guess I will speak on the difficulty. This game was genuinely, you could have slept and beat this game. It was not hard at all. And, like, I didn't even grind, really. Like, okay, the first time I had to grind, the game starts off, you're getting whooped, like, every single time. Like, you gotta be careful early on in the game because it is genuinely, like, hard at the first part of the game. But, like, all I did at the beginning of the game was just grind to get gold so I could actually get, like, all the equipment and stuff. And that ended up me being, like, pretty high level. So, like, none of the overworld enemies or anything like that, or really even the bosses, had much of an effect on me. And then, like I said, the only other time I really had difficulty was once I got to Castle Pandemonium and I had to beat the Emperor again, and just because he kind of regens throughout the fight. So then I had to go back and do some grinding, but like I only ever had to grind twice in this entire game. So it is not hard at all. Like, as compared to every other Final Fantasy game I've played, it's baby stuff. It's chump change. So yeah, that is weird. That I think they probably didn't make it too hard so you wouldn't have to grind a lot and deal with that kind of tedious leveling system, but it is not hard at all. Like, that wasn't really to its detriment, because when I play an RPG, I'm not expecting something really hard, but I am expecting to have to do some strategy. However, spells suck in this game. That's another thing I gotta speak on. Spells do barely any damage. Like, the only time a spell's gonna be of any quality is when it's maxed out at level 16, and it's still not great there. Like, if you can just level up the person's weapon ability, it will do equal damage. So there's no point in really leveling up spells in this game. Not really even using spells unless they're white magic like healing or like Cure and Asuna. But, like, yeah, the spells in this game made it more of a slog, because legit all you could do is just click on auto battles, just hit them with the physical attacks, and you'd win every fight. So that is a major detriment to this game. It's gameplay loop and also its leveling system. Those are the two big problems I have with it. But, like, when it comes to art was really cool. I loved the Pixel Remaster version specifically because the sprites were, like, large and beefy, because they were originally 8-bit. And now putting them in this new, like, 16-bit style made them look kind of odd, but they were also kind of cute because they were larger and they looked more cartoonish, and I really liked that. Now, I don't know who my favorite sprite would be. It'd probably be the Emperor, honestly, because fighting the Emperor, not the second form. The second form of the Emperor is kind of meh, it's kind of regular demon looking thing. But the first time you fight the Emperor, he looks really cool, and I really did like that sprite. Now, what else is there? Music sprite. I guess I'll kind of get to my ranking now, because that's all I really have to say about it, because it was a great story. Like, this story is genuinely phenomenal, though it is kind of simplistic. It's far better. It's the leap between Final Fantasy 1 and Final Fantasy 2 story-wise is immense. However, the gameplay is a digression. So, it degrades. I don't know if digression is a word. But yeah. So, now on to, like, the ranking. Like I said, so I have played 6 mainline Final Fantasy games now. 16, 7. I've played bits of 8 too. So, okay, let's see how I'm going to rank this. So, first, 16. Second, 6. Third, 4. And fourth place would probably be still the parts of 8 that I played. I never completed 8. I need to go back and do that. But I really enjoyed the parts of 8 that I played, especially the little card game. So I put 8 in fourth. Then in fifth would be 7. Then in sixth would be 2. And then in seventh would be 1 in last place. So, yeah, that, like I said, 2 wasn't great. 2 was most certainly trying to figure things out. It was experimental. I like experimental stuff, but this experimental just really didn't do it for me. Now, platinum this game. I did platinum this game, and it wasn't a hard platinum at all. I didn't miss anything, and just followed a treasure chest guide, got everything, and it was fine. Nothing acted finicky like it did with 6. So it legit only took me, I believe, less than like 19 hours and some change to beat this game. So it's a really easy game to beat. I'd highly recommend playing it. It is a good game in the Final Fantasy line, like I said, for the story alone. But you really could just watch a video essay on the story and not play it and still get a good experience, because the gameplay of this game is not enjoyable, like I said. So that's all it really is for Final Fantasy 2. I don't think I'm going to give it a numerical rating. I think I'll just give it with the ranking as is, so you can see as in comparison to how I believe it is with other games. But I do have a very unconventional taste when it comes to Final Fantasy games, because I don't really like 7, and I like 8 more. But I think I like, out of the big, the Golden Age ones, 9, 8, and 7, I think 8 is the least liked, which I don't really get. I gotta play 9. I gotta play 9 sometime. I got it on my Switch, so I might pick it up sometime soon. But yeah, so that's all it really is for Final Fantasy 2, and that's all I really have for episode 261 of Shelf Review. So, thank you very much for watching.